Kimber here. Terry is our Chief Financial Officer, and he is going to, well, I'll let you explain.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I'll never be able to follow this crew. These guys here at Pinello are amazing, and they all left, but my favorite mascot is the Panther. I was a Panther growing up, so it makes it nice. No, what I'm here tonight to do is to share what we have done with the relief dollars that we received from the federal government for coronavirus relief. And there's a bunch of different pots, different pieces, and I just kind of wanted to take the time to walk down through with our DAAC program what we received, how we use those funds, how we're using those funds, and what the end result of that is going to be when we get done. So with that, Whitefield School District has been fortunate enough again to receive a significant number of dollars from the federal government. And we're targeted to help school districts respond and react to the coronavirus pandemic. This was very important in light of significant budget cuts that we had at the same time. When the pandemic hit, everybody went home for basically three months. When they shut the economy down, that shut down all the drivers that were putting money into the state, which is where we received most of our money. And so the state didn't have the money to be able to forward. So this was to help a lot of ways to help us with that. These funds have helped by providing funding to address the lost learning. You heard that earlier. I think Ms. Monson brought that up a little bit. We had the lost learning for the students who were gone for a period of time, and also from being able to be at home, being home learners from our Learn at Home piece that we had for district. That's not ideal for every family and every student, and so we've been blessed really with the ability to use these funds. It all started off with what was called CRF, or the Coronavirus Relief Funds, and our district received about $4.77 million. And what I want to remind you guys is what was happening at the time when that happened. We were going through a time where we weren't in school. We were going through a time where it was very important for us to have very good hygiene in our schools, as far as cleaning, air, and ventilation. Through this whole process, they figured out that the best thing we could ever do is fresh air. And you heard that noise we had heard earlier. They turned it off. That filter system right there, that was cleaning the air. That was one of the things we were able to purchase. So it was very important for us at the time to have enough to bring kids back and to also, before they even came back, to get the schools clean, purified, as well as providing the equipment that we needed, PPE. So at that time, it was big to have the plexiglasses and the masks. We all hated the masks, but we all wore them, didn't we? And that type of thing. So what we did with those funds is we used a significant amount of money on what we call PPE, or the personal protective equipment. Excuse me, I'm stumbling over my words here, sharing nothing new. We use salaries to support student lost learning. So when we were able to take what we had, the difference between what we did the prior year when we closed school and the current year, we were able to use those dollars to help support that. We used it to pay for the federally mandated leave. We had teachers and staff that were out sick with COVID, or they had family members out sick, and we had to grant them a certain amount of days at that particular time to be gone. We used those dollars for that. The biggest thing we used it for, guys, was the technology, so that we could send home a device for every kid to have the ability to learn at home. So we had to buy significant. It was about $1.7 million worth of computers that we invested in. And then I mentioned earlier about the deep cleaning. That was almost $600,000 district-wide, to be able to provide all the filtering systems and the cleaning, and we had a company that came in and we called them the Darth Vader guns. They shoot the bio-shield on everything, and so we did that. We also, at that time, started adding additional social workers into our system. As we could find them to hire, we put another social worker here, because we didn't have a social worker at every school at that time. We do now, which is nice. This is what helped us get to that point. And we provided general fund support for the district. That means that some of the things that we were able to pay out of here, we didn't have to pay out of the general fund, and then we were able to turn around and use that to help in other ways. Next came the ESSER. Every student succeeds is what that stood for. And that's with the CARES Act. We got a $1.2 million. These funds were to address the immediate crisis, but the funds had to be spent by 9/30/2022, so about a month ago. We had to have them spent. We spent all of them in the first year. We were done it by June 30th. Why did we use that on? We used that to help fund Mrs. Monson's time with counseling all these students that we had that are coming back and going, oh my gosh, and then the new kids, the new kindergartners had never known not anything about masks. They came to school knowing that that's all they knew, was that you had to come to school with a mask. And that took a lot of time. We had to buy another round of PPE, another round of masks, another round of hand sanitizers, replacement filters, those types of things. The other thing we had to do when we sent people home, because we were at this particular time, was the time when we quarantined not the entire school, but different classrooms. They would go home with their computer, they had to have a computer, but a lot of people, of our students, do not have the ability to access the internet, so we had to send what they call hotspots home. So they had internet access so they could log on. And those things were, and additional equipment to make all that work. And then we had another round of social workers. We kept adding on as best we could to get them into the schools. Then we also had to help our teachers learn how to use the equipment and the programs to be able to learn from home. They had to learn Schoology and I don't know all the other terms and all the different pieces because I'm just a bean counter downstairs. But we had to have somebody that knew how to do that and could help train teachers. And so we did that and had some support there. And again, this is to help support the general fund. Then we got another batch of money called ESSER 2. That was the CRRS Act that was passed, and we received nearly $5 million. Now all this, guys, this sounds like an awful lot of money that we're getting in when I keep talking about these numbers. Every month, when I go to the board, I say, please approve $9–10 million worth of expenditures each month. So you can see that while these numbers are big, it's a fraction of what the district spends in total. But the ESSER 2 Act was to help provide stability and manage the crisis as we were coming back out of it. Okay, these funds have to be spent by the end of next year, September of 2023. What did we do? We finished filling the schools with social workers. So every school now has a social worker in it. Darlene's been blessed to be here for umpteen years at Pinello, but some schools had to share social workers. You probably actually were one of those people in the past that shared schools as well, if I remember right.
Yes.
And so now every school has a social worker. We also had to expand our D3 My Way, our online school. During the pandemic, a lot of people said, I'm not sending my kids back to school with this thing going on. We had at one time, we went from a school of 99 to a school of 1,500 and some odd students, which was, your guys' school was the largest school in our district for about 8 to 9 months. And so that provided, these funds helped provide for that expansion and get that wrapped up so that these guys have this great place that they call home now. Credit recovery, during the pandemic we had a lot of kids who struggled getting all the credits needed to school to be able to graduate. We had to ramp that up. We had to hire additional teachers, get people who were willing, and then we also have, we pay that, how we pay that is through a stipend by the number of kids and the number of classes they teach. That grew tremendously. We were able to use these funds to help support that increase. And then, again, I mentioned earlier about the ventilation. Watson is one of our schools that struggle the most with ventilation. Around the circle, they remodeled that with some other funds, our best grant that we had there. And while we're in the process, we're going ahead and putting in ventilation. That process is still ongoing today. And then again, it provided another portion of funds to help us do some different things through the general fund. And the last batch of funds that we received is the ESSER 3, or the ARP-ACT, you've heard of the American Recovery Program. We received $11.24 million for that. These funds were provided to recovery and accelerate that recovery, and there's a requirement that we spend a minimum of 20% of that has to be spent on lost learning catch-up. Okay, for your guys' information, we're in around the 40% mark for how we're spending those funds on that. We know that that's one of the biggest priorities that we need to have, is making sure our students that didn't get what they needed or various ways that we're pushing that out hard with that. We started out with summer jumpstart academies. We wanted to get kids excited about school again. We've never had summer school for our secondary schools. We started that. We started teaching kids how to dissect octopuses and octopi, or however you say that, I think, leave. But those kinds of things. And we got kids excited about learning again, which was great. We expanded our elementary to include some different things, so we expanded that there. We started a junior high catapult program. Kids, we started it in this, so we had an elementary program, but we don't have a junior high program. The catapult program is to take kids that are severe behavior kids and remove them from a classroom, put them in an isolated unit in our own place that is then able to help function those kids, but more so to help get them out of the classroom so that teachers can continue to teach the kids that are sitting in that class. So we're have that in there. Lost learning support. Again, we hired additional teachers. We hired 5 additional teachers in the elementary schools and 3 additional teachers in the junior highs, above staffing levels. We have a way we staff teachers by the number of students that are in there. We have added on top of the ones, we added more so that we could keep those class size smaller, actually added another class here and there so that we can really work on that, catching those kids up. That was roughly $2.3 million right there alone. Elementary and junior high intervention programs. So we added interventionists at the elementary and junior high so that we could have pull those kids out and really work hard with some of the kids that were struggling the most. We also have 2 additional instructional days. We started that this year. This is the first year. We added 2 instructional days. That's something these 2 had wanted for a long time. We finally put that in. We were able to use these funds for a couple of years to be able to get that going and move forward. That's going to be huge. 2 full days of instruction for kids. Doesn't seem like much, but it really does add up for kids. Ventilation. We added ventilation again for 2 elementary schools. And we also, at the end of the life of this, we bought computers in the chronology of this 2.5 years ago. These Chromebooks last about 3 to 4 years. So we bought a massive amount of computers that are going to go out of style and out of touch right at the end of these dollars. We're going to use these dollars then to replace those to be able to move on down the road, which is great news for us as far as that goes. Additional counseling staff. We at Grand Mountain, their school grew beyond what we ever thought it would that fast, and so they needed additional counseling staff out there. And we also needed a counseling staff at D3 My Way because that was a new school. That's another place that we added a counseling staff inside there. We were able to use these funds to help with that. We also expanded your guys' school all the way down the hallway. Before you had this little spot just on the south side of the building. Now you go all the way down the hallway, and so we expanded that. And in doing that, we had to move some other people out, put in a modular to move our tech department in, move these people here, move these people there. But in all, it was to be able to accommodate having now, you guys' school is about 250. Last year was about 350. That's a pretty large school now. And then provided general fund support. When I say that, what that means is our staff are amazing, and getting through this particular pandemic has been very hard on everybody. And there's nobody that has earned some respect and some kudos out of this. They've been our teachers and then principals and staff. With that, we aren't able to take these monies and help pay staff. We weren't able to do that. But because we were able to use this money to pay things that we would have out of the general fund already, we were able to take the general fund money and we were able to provide stipends for our staff to reward them for the hard work. Because it was above and beyond by any means, trying to figure out how to teach online, help coming back. Nope, we got kids got to go out again. All those kinds of things. And so we wanted to make sure our teachers were compensated. And so we're able to use these dollars to use for other areas that then we could then turn around and reward our staff with. The one question that I think that most of you, I know he's going to ask it, at least at some point in time, is, okay, you had all these funds, and what are you doing with them? What's going to happen when they're gone? We've been planning for that starting last year. At the end of last year, we knew these funds are going to be gone. We have different pieces of the pie. We are evaluating every one of these line items that we have. We just actually had a retreat on it on Monday, as a matter of fact. trying to walk down through the items that we are as we get ready to start preparing for next year's budget. Which of these items have to go back into the main budget? Which items do not? What worked? What didn't work? And we're working down through that. And so these funds have been extremely helpful in providing the resources that we need. But we are very thoughtful of the fact that, again, I mentioned earlier about the computers. We know the computers are going to essentially die off about the same time these funds die off. We're saving a big pot of money to be able to replace a lot of those so that we can continue the one-on-one device process that we have with our kids, so that all kids have the ability to have a computer on their desk now in their buildings. Now, they may not be sitting right here, but somewhere in this building there's a computer for every kid that sits in. Well, this is no a room, but there's a computer sitting there somewhere for everybody. There they are, right there. Right there, they're sitting right there. And so we know that's going to have to happen. That's what we're putting in place, trying to make sure that works. So with that, guys, the second set of documents that you have, Colorado School Finance Project does a lot of good stuff and puts out a lot of good information. And this is just Whitefields and the general information from these particular funds. And you can read down through those at your leisure. But I wanted to provide that to you because it's really good information. The other thing that's big on here is you guys have their website. This is a great resource for any of you that want to have anything, learn anything about school finance, what's going on, coming at a state level. And then they also have resources that can dial down like this, down right into our district. I've bored you enough because these numbers, I didn't give you a whole bunch of numbers, but I want to make sure that you guys are aware of that we received these dollars and how we're using these dollars and how it benefited our district as we went through. Any questions? Yes? Oh, I thought you wanted to. I was all excited for a minute. Somebody was going to ask me a question. Yeah, there we go. My favorite color? I'm going to tell you it's purple.
You seem like a purple person.
He wears a lot of Mace too.
I was going to say, is that a
Purple.
Visa reference?
It's Purple Wednesday. Years ago when I, in my previous life, everybody showed up one day with purple on Wednesday, and so it became a thing, and when I came here, I brought it with me. That was 11 years ago, by the way. Can you believe that?
So his presentation represents the additional funding that we got over quite a bit of time, you know, through the pandemic and in the aftermath, and it's still going. So again, questions about what we did, you know, how we did it. It's important for us to, you know, be able to communicate to our constituents about how we use those funds. And again, Terry did a great job of going through all the different areas, and he hit all those main areas. Are there any parts that weren't quite clear or need further explanation as to what we did with that in particular? Hopefully, you saw these things, and you may not have realized why they came about, or you know, how we paid for those, or what have you. But again, as Terry pointed out, there's several items just in this room that came from those dollars. Overall, the big thing to remember is that, you know, we are evaluating what we need to maintain with that and how we incorporate that into the regular budget without, you know, at the mercy of something else. And so that's very strategic in how you make that happen, because we don't get to choose to have a bigger pot of money, you know, a bigger pie of money or anything like that. So we have to be very strategic about where we're taking our money. But things like social worker support for our students, you know, anything that goes directly to the students and their support needs is always very important to us. So we definitely want to make sure that those types of things are included.
I did have a question about the additional staff in terms of the teachers. Since you added those extra teachers, is that something that you're going to then go back and reevaluate, make larger classroom sizes if your budget doesn't allow for the teachers to remain?
That would probably be the way that would work. Right now, we've really reduced class sizes down. Even if we pull those teachers out, our class sizes are not going to balloon up past what we're able to. We are well overstaffed based on the staffing formula, but every school, every situation stands alone right now. When we get to the staffing process, the principals will.
And this is a school-by-school basis, not
school-by-school basis, and we'll sit down and we'll say, okay, here's what we have going on. Our other big piece that I didn't mention before, a lot of the interventionists we would have had to have cut them before because our title funds were cut significantly. We lost over $100 and some odd thousand worth of title funds during this pandemic process, and that was very hard. And instead of losing those positions, we moved them into these ESSER positions so that we could continue to have those interventionists and those particular title people pulling those kids out and working with them so we can do that while we're in. We have to reevaluate all that, and that's what we're in the process of doing. So you're absolutely right, we are evaluating that. It's going to be on a school-by-school basis as we work down through the process. The principals will have their opportunity to plead their case of why they need them, why they don't, where they would like that to go. So,
And two things that really go into that process, you guys, that help us out is we'll have natural attrition. There'll be people that retire or what have you, and then we reevaluate those positions or the staffing in those buildings. But the bigger thing that happened is we have been able to consistently increase our student enrollment back to pre-pandemic numbers. Even though across the nation, students, if you will, disappeared, went online or what have you, went all kinds of different places. We weren't immune to that, even though it didn't impact us as much as some of the other surrounding school districts in the region. We did lose students during the pandemic. We are back to those pre-pandemic numbers, so that definitely helps with staffing. So some of those COVID release funds allowed us to maintain our staffing during COVID when our student numbers were down. But now that our student numbers are back up, we're right back to where we should be staffing-wise. So that really helps offset. That's one of the most significant portions that helps us, or significant factors that help us offset any of those needs coming out of this country. So, that's why you see a lot of us doing a lot of things to promote enrollment and to encourage, students and families to remain in Whitefield School District 3.
I'm going to change my answer. I'm going to say green.
Look like a green person also. I'm still doing my job.
So with the staffing looking at being changed, what are we gunning for as far as teaching the student classroom?
Well,
especially in elementary and going into like junior high.
So we have in the primary, in the kinder through first and second grades, that's at 23 and a half students per student, or 23 and a half is what we use per school, per grade, or not per grade, but per classroom. That's an average. So some classrooms could have 27, some could have 22, and it's but that's what we use for a staffing formula. The other thing we use in the junior highs is 25 and a half. In junior highs we staff at 25 and a half for every teacher. And so that's the numbers we use there. And then in high school it's 26 and a half.
And third and fifth grade is?
Third and fifth is 25 and a half. Yep.
Many of our classrooms currently are below that because we're maintaining our staffing again with the pandemic numbers. We do have some numbers that are creeping up there, and so we always take a look at that. That's a good problem to have. Sometimes you have to grow before you can, before you expand, if you will.
And it's difficult because sometimes you're going to have a grade. I'm going to use a grade we had that ran through from the time I came here. I think they're graduated this last year, but they were at Webster. We had a class that had 30 more students at Webster every year they went across. And so they had an extra teacher in that grade. That one teacher would have to essentially move every year, or a teacher would have to do that in another class. And so we monitor that. We see where that's at. In schools like Pinellas that are small, that may not always be the case because you may have a big class that is going to have 25 kids in the class, because adding a third teacher would put it down to 16, 17 in class, and that's not efficient either. So
they don't always come in equally spread across the grade levels, and so Pinellas being a good example. I don't know your numbers exactly off the top of my head, but you run basically 2 sections of each grade level. But that doesn't mean that you have exactly 50 kids per grade level. You might have 80 in one grade level and 40 in another, kind of making those numbers up. But that's what Terry's talking about, is trying to adjust for that.
And that's not a recent phenomenon, but when Kirk and I were in school, we had 30 to 32, 33 kids in every class. Back in the olden days.
Good question.
Yep.
Other questions about the funding, staffing?
You guys go on the field trip today? Was it good?
Yeah.
It was a little long, but
Thank you, Mr. Kimber.
Thank you guys.